Hey there all, my name is Azadi Bagaliabov. I am the founder and main tutor for Degrees of Freedom. A few years ago I did a course on Spring Boot tricks for those who were in code school and wanted to understand the basics of Spring Boot and how you might do certain tasks. Something a number of my students, who many of them are code school grads or people who are just starting their career out and want to know a little more, have asked me how you do a REST API in Node.js. There's many ways you could do this, from the database you choose to the front-end technology, React, Vue, Angular, something totally different, heck, even jQuery. Believe it or not, it still happens in the industry in 2023 with legacy software. So what we've chosen to do here is a simple Node app using React as the front end. It has been deliberately simplified. It'll be a simple REST API, which will feature cores for crossing the different domains that we're dealing with, localhost 3000 to 3100. It'll deal with body parsing. It'll deal with post, get, and delete. So let's get jumping in here. I've got it in a mono repo setting. In a production environment, you probably want these separate, but it never hurts to have them stored together in Git either, based on personal preference. These are completely independent of each other and will compile independently. If we look at fitness server, we see an index.js file. In reality, you probably want this to be broken into a few files, but since it's so small and simple, we're just doing it in a single file here. We've included the packages Express, Mongoose, Body Parser, and Cores. Express allows us to have the REST API. It's been around for a very good long time, since I was back in college. And that's been what, 10 years now? And Mongoose, which is a object relational, or in the case of Mongo, an object document mapper. Body parser, which allows for you to parse the body as you receive it in the REST request. And then cores, which allows you to call a different domain from the one in which you have originated. So it allows you to cross, for instance, localhost 3100 versus localhost 3000. For the record, I do have a Mongo setting, Mongo running on 27017 inside of MongoDB Compass. I'm running it within a Docker container, but you could also run it within any kind of setting you want. If you're on Mac or Linux, you might install it via the command line. On Windows, you might use Compass or Docker. Just make sure you have a running variation of Mongo going. I'm using the current version of Mongo, and I don't recall what version that is. I think it's 4, but yeah. So here, what we have now, to walk through the anatomy, we define our port, we tell the app to parse the body as JSON and to use cores. Then we connect to the Mongo connection string on localhost 27017, which is the default. And this is straight from the Mongoose website, the connection string. So that's what I've pulled down for the simplicity, and it uses promises. As can be noticed by the then and catch. There could well be an async await option now, but that's not what was on the Mongoose site, so I'm not messing with that. Here we've defined our schema. You might have heard that with Mongo being NoSQL, that you don't have to worry about schemas, because you can change it as you go, make it sparse, add columns on the fly. This is true. This is where things become more of an object relational mapper. In our example, we want everything to be true because we want to require them. So what we've done here is we've required sets, reps, weight, name, and date to be required. We've made sure the ID is unique and that it's using the object ID type, which gives it something that's not easily guessable. On line 28, we have created a model called weight schema, which matches the weight schema given here. On lines 30 through lines 59, we have our REST endpoints, starting with a GET endpoint that takes a request and a response. It will pull in the weights, it will find everything, and return a response of 200 response code, and it will send the weights. In this particular very simple scenario, we don't have to worry about what happens if we don't have any weights, because Mongoose will send an empty array. That's the beauty of it. The same thing happens when looking up by ID. You may notice on line 35, we have this ID field. This ID tells us what we want to pull in, and then we can call the request parameters ID. And that will then find that particular entry and send a 200 status to the weight, and if nothing is found, it just returns empty again. In a production setting, you probably want it to be a little more robust and give a different response back if it's empty through ifs and other checks. But for our purposes, we're not worried about it. Then we have the post call. Here we have the request and the response, and instead of calling request params like we do on line 36, we call request body on line 41 and assign that to data. There is argument of whether we use let versus const, and both would be valuable. Here I've just said let for the sake of simplicity, and const on our actual weight entry. And here I've told it the ID needs to be an object ID, and the rest of them come from our actual data that's pulled, and our date uses the base ISO string function in JavaScript. We then save it as a promise, then we either console log that it added the record or print the error out. Finally, we give a 200 OK and add the record. In the delete, we now will delete everything. You could do a similar response to what you did on line 35, wait by ID and then tell it to delete by the ID with the relevant call to Mongoose, but we're going to simply stick to deleting everything. And then we'll give it 200 and say all entries deleted. Finally, we're listening on the port, which we said was 3100, and we're not giving any message. So coming here to the command prompt, in my case PowerShell, we're going to go to fitness server. We're going to do node index.js. It's going to complain with a warning that it can't specify a custom index as it doesn't allow overwriting it. So that is something to keep in mind that apparently has changed since they last updated the Mongoose system. I don't work in Mongoose very much. I tend to work more on the Spring side of things. But if we're to go to our API here and do a get on wait, it is empty. However, if we do a post on wait and we are to change out what I had before from my other API, we were to go sets 5, reps 10, weight, and we'll go 50 pounds or kilograms if you're working in metric. The name would be shoulder press. And then we can leave date alone as it'll be added, and ID alone as it'll be added. When we send, we see successfully added record, which is precisely what we see here inside of the code. So when we now go to do a get, we receive back our entry. Also, if we were to grab this ID and toss it right here, now we see just that one ID, which isn't all that impressive. But what if we did bench press and we did 45 and 3, we erase the ID just to add a second record? Well, then we'd have 2 records. These 2 records, if we just grab the 1 now, we only receive the 1. So that proves that works. We're not going to delete. That is something we don't need to do right now, but it would work the same way by just going down and running a delete and then removing the ID. So next thing we're going to do is go to our React piece. I'm going to open a new terminal and I'm going to show you the app first, and then we'll go over the code. Wrong folder. So And now we see our 2 entries. This is awesome. It's already pulling it from the database. But now we can always go ahead and do something a little more fun, such as going ahead and adding in a new exercise, website exercise. Number of sats, 5, 30 reps each, 10 pounds or kilograms. And now it shows up. If we go back to Postman and we do a get on everything, we now see 3 records. We can also grab our ID right here off of the browser, get it right here, and see it again. So this is exactly what we'd hope for. So now let's look at the React code and how this plays in. So if we go to the React code to app.js, we see 2 components, add weight and show weight. If we go into the components, the add weight is going to be the one that's going to be a little more complex of the 2. We're using the useState hook. This has a number of fields here, one for name, sat, reps, and weight. We're pointing to the localhost 3100 endpoint, which we're using on the server side. When we handle the submit button, which is here, that is this code, which I'm going to collapse for now. So we're going to first go over the component itself. There's some styling provided, but here we see a very basic HTML form. In here you'll notice the handlebars for the styles, which we provided. The styles are just simple JSX CSS objects. These are all required fields for validation. The onChange handlers are here to tell it what to do, which this then tells the code to change each of these values with the useState upon changing what's inside of them. And that's how things are stored and sent back. Without this, you would have to write custom event handling to check it, and this is where hooks become one of your best friends. When you do the submit, which says on submit call handle submit, then what we can do is let data equal all these entries. Okay, how's that help us much? Well, it's pulling from the hooks. If you recall, we used the hooks every time we typed in a command to go ahead and set the values. Then we do a fetch with a post in the CORS mode, allowing us to cross domains again. So we can call localhost 3100 from localhost 3000. We're not caching, we're using the same origin credentials. It's going to be application JSON headers, follow the redirect, don't refer, and then the body becomes a JSONified version of what we put inside of data, and it returns it back. So this is how we are using everything, and if we look back at our simple app here, all we see is just the 2 hooks, which gives a very clean setup. From here, things you might want to do to it, add tests. Tests are always really good. In a program this simple, it wouldn't be hard to write a few tests. For the scope of this video, I've decided not to, but if I did, I would probably go with something along the lines of an automated test. Something unit, and then something that would be a visual test that you can look at and touch and see it run, like Cypress. So if you were to take a course with me, we'd be going over all these steps of how this works and doing a live coding. From the very beginning, building it up, trying it out, breaking it, having errors, fixing them, and getting the final product. So I hope this gives you a great taste of how it is to work with me. And please keep an eye open in the comment section of this video, as I am working on a much larger course that will show how to do multiple languages with REST APIs, because you can easily switch out your backend server without the front end knowing it, as long as the JSON is the same and as long as the port is the same. or you can alternatively just change the port in your code that it calls to, and it won't know the difference. So some popular languages could be Python with Django, it could be Go, it could be Rust, it could be Java with Spring, .NET. That is the kind of subjects that I like to cover in my courses. So if this is of interest, please reach out to me further in the comments with your interest of what you'd like to see, or keep an eye out for me to drop a link to an upcoming course. Thanks so much, and thanks for watching.